I stood in the foyer of the Rosedale house I'd called home for 13 years, watching my adoptive mother Victoria arrange white lilies in a crystal vase. It was the morning of my 18th birthday, and the envelope from the University of Toronto lay open on the marble console table. The acceptance letter gleamed in the June sunlight streaming through the bay windows. "We need to talk about university," Victoria said without looking at me. She adjusted a lily stem with surgical precision, the same way she'd orchestrated every aspect of my life since the Granger family had adopted me at 5 years old. My twin sister Madison breezed down the curved staircase, her blonde hair still damp from her shower. She wore the casual confidence of someone who'd never questioned their place in the world. We shared a birthday, but little else. "Is that Emma's acceptance?" Madison asked, peering at the letter. "Toronto, nice. Not as impressive as Queen's, but still." Victoria set down her gardening shears with a soft click. "Yes, about that. Your father and I have made a decision. The education fund your grandfather established will go entirely to Madison. You, Emma, will need to find alternative arrangements." The words hit like a slap, though I kept my face carefully neutral. Years of walking on eggshells in this house had taught me to hide my reactions. "But the fund was set up for both of us," I said quietly. "Grandfather Granger established it before we graciously opened our home to you," Victoria interrupted. Her voice carried that crisp edge she reserved for unpleasant conversations. "We've spent 13 years clothing you, feeding you, sending you to Upper Canada College alongside Madison. Do you have any idea what that cost? The fund has been depleted, covering your expenses. What remains belongs to our biological daughter." David, my adoptive father, appeared in the doorway of his study. He looked uncomfortable, loosening his tie. "Victoria, perhaps we should..." "Should what, David? Reward her for being someone else's responsibility?" Victoria's smile was as cold as the marble beneath our feet. "Emma should be grateful we took her in after that situation. That situation. The car accident that supposedly killed my birth parents when I was 5. The tragedy that made me an orphan. A charity case. A burden to be borne by the benevolent Granger family." Victoria reached into her Hermes handbag and pulled out a white envelope. She placed it on the console table next to my acceptance letter. "Here, $500. That should cover your first semester's textbooks if you're frugal. We've done our duty. $500. For university. For the future, I'd work toward through every advanced placement class, every scholarship application, every night studying, while Madison partied with her friends." Madison shifted uncomfortably. "Mom, that seems..." "Madison, this doesn't concern you," Victoria said sharply. "You have packing to do. Queen's orientation is in September." I stared at the envelope. $500 to replace the education fund that should have guaranteed my future. The fund my grandfather had supposedly established for us both. "I see," I said softly. I picked up the envelope, feeling the thin stack of bills inside. Then I reached into my own bag and pulled out a manila envelope I'd been carrying for 3 weeks, ever since I'd found it. "Before I go," I said, my voice steadier than I felt, "I wanted to give you this, for your records." I placed the manila envelope on the table. Victoria glanced at it with disinterest, then back to her lilies. "I've already arranged for a moving truck," I continued. "It'll be here this afternoon. I'll be out by evening." "How practical," Victoria murmured. "And Victoria?" I waited until she looked at me. "You might want to open that envelope. Before you finish arranging those flowers." Something in my tone made her pause. She picked up the manila envelope slowly, her perfectly manicured nails sliding under the seal. She pulled out the documents inside. I watched her face drain of color, the blood leaving so quickly she had to grip the console table for support. Her eyes scanned the pages, photocopies of trust documents, bank statements, forged signatures. "Where did you get these?" Her voice was barely a whisper. "From the original files, the ones you thought you destroyed when you transferred my inheritance to your name." I kept my voice even, professional, the way my biological mother had taught me during our phone calls over the past 3 weeks. The education fund wasn't from Grandfather Granger. It was from Catherine Chen, my birth mother. The mother who didn't die in a car accident. The mother you told me was dead. David moved closer, his face confused. "What are you talking about?" "The trust fund was $500,000, I continued. "Set up by Catherine Chen when she gave me up for adoption at 19. She was a law student then, couldn't raise me, but she wanted to ensure my future. The trust was meant to mature when I turned 18. But when I was 12, someone forged my signature and transferred the funds into a joint account with Victoria Granger. Victoria's hand trembled as she shuffled through the documents. Madison stood frozen on the staircase. "You also collected adoption subsidy payments," I said. "The Ontario government provides support for adoptive families. You collected those for 13 years, $200,000 in total, money meant for my care. I have the records. They're in that envelope too." "This is ridiculous," Victoria said, but her voice lacked conviction. "David, call our lawyer." "Oh, you'll want to call a lawyer," I agreed. "You'll definitely need one, because the woman pulling into your driveway right now, she's already called hers." Victoria's head snapped toward the bay window. A black Mercedes was gliding up the circular drive. I recognized it immediately, though I'd only seen it in person once, 3 weeks ago when I'd driven to the law offices of Chen and Associates in downtown Toronto. The driver's door opened. Catherine Chen stepped out, and even from inside the house, I could see the resemblance everyone said we shared. The same dark hair, the same determined set to her jaw, the same eyes that looked like they could see right through deception. She was wearing a charcoal gray suit, carrying a leather briefcase, and she walked toward the house with the confidence of someone who'd spent 25 years winning cases in Canadian courts. "That's Catherine Chen," I said quietly, "partner at one of Toronto's top litigation firms. She's represented clients in fraud cases, embezzlement cases, cases involving the exploitation of vulnerable individuals. She's also my biological mother, and as of this morning, she's my legal representative." Victoria grabbed the edge of the console table so hard her knuckles went white. The crystal vase tipped, sending water and lilies cascading across the marble floor. She didn't seem to notice. The doorbell rang. Its chime echoed through the foyer like a death knell. David looked between me and Victoria, understanding finally dawning on his face. "Victoria, what did you do?" But Victoria couldn't answer. She was staring at the documents in her hand, then at the door, then at me. For the first time in 13 years, I saw fear in her eyes. I walked past her to open the door. Catherine stood on the threshold, and when she looked at me, I saw something I'd never seen in Victoria's eyes. Pride, love, recognition. "Hello, Emma," she said softly. "Hello, Catherine." I'd practiced not calling her mom yet. We'd agreed to take things slowly, to build a relationship based on truth rather than forced obligations. She stepped into the foyer, her heels clicking on the marble. Her gaze swept over Victoria, David, Madison, then settled on Victoria with laser focus. "Mrs. Granger," Catherine said, her voice professional and cold. "I'm Catherine Chen, and I'm here regarding the fraudulent appropriation of my daughter's trust fund, the collection of government subsidies under false pretenses, and the emotional distress caused by your deliberate concealment of my existence. I believe you have documents there that outline just a fraction of what we'll be discussing in court. Let me take you back to how this all started. How I went from being grateful, invisible Emma Granger to someone who finally understood the truth about her own life. It began 4 weeks ago, on a rainy Saturday afternoon in May. Victoria and David had taken Madison to Queen's University for an early campus tour. I'd begged off, claiming I had a research paper due. Really, I just wanted a day in the house without walking on eggshells, without measuring every word, without feeling like an intruder in my own home. I decided to do some spring cleaning in my room, sorting through old clothes and books, before university. That's when I remembered the boxes in the attic. Victoria had mentioned once, years ago, that they'd kept some of my things from before the adoption, before the Grangers, before my life as Emma Granger began. I'd never looked. Partly because Victoria made it clear she found the topic uncomfortable, and partly because I'd been afraid of what I might find. But that afternoon, with the rain drumming on the roof and the house empty and quiet, curiosity won out. The attic was dim and dusty, filled with the accumulated debris of the Granger family's carefully curated life. Designer luggage, old tax documents, Madison's childhood artwork preserved in archival boxes. And in the far corner, beneath a moth-eaten blanket, 3 cardboard boxes with Emma Arrival written in faded marker. My hands shook as I opened the first box. Baby clothes, impossibly tiny. A stuffed rabbit with one ear chewed off. A hospital bracelet with a date, my birth date, and a name that made me freeze. Baby girl Chen. Not Granger. Chen. I pulled out the second box. More clothes, some photo albums with pictures of a woman I didn't recognize holding a baby that must have been me. The woman was young, maybe 19 or 20, with long dark hair and tired eyes. On the back of one photo, in careful handwriting, Catherine and Emma, 3 months old. Catherine. Not the names of the parents who'd supposedly died in the car accident, not the tragic story Victoria had told me when I was old enough to ask questions. The third box was smaller, and when I lifted the lid, I found a large manila envelope with "For Emma to be opened on her 18th birthday" written across the front. The handwriting matched the photo. My 18th birthday was 3 weeks away. I sat on the dusty attic floor, rain pounding overhead, and opened the envelope. Inside was a letter, several legal documents, and a photograph of a young woman in a graduation gown, holding her law degree. The letter was dated 18 years ago. My dearest Emma, if you're reading this, you've turned 18. You're an adult now, capable of understanding truths I couldn't tell you when you were small. I am your mother, Catherine Chen. I gave birth to you when I was 19 years old, in my second year of law school at the University of Toronto. Your father was a fellow student who made it clear he wanted no part of parenthood. I was alone, broke, and terrified. I made the hardest decision of my life. I placed you for adoption with the understanding that you would have the stable, secure home I couldn't provide. But I never stopped being your mother. I never stopped loving you. Before I signed the adoption papers, I established a trust fund with the money my own parents left me when they died, $500,000, to be held until your 18th birthday to fund your education and give you the start in life I couldn't give you myself. I became a lawyer. I built a practice. I never married, never had other children. Every year on your birthday, I called the adoption agency, checking that you were safe and loved. They told me the Grangers were a good family. They told me you were thriving. But the adoption was closed. I had no rights to contact you. The law was clear. I had to wait until you were 18, until you could choose for yourself whether you wanted to know me. I'm waiting for you, Emma. I have been waiting for 18 years. When you're ready, when you want to know the truth about where you came from and who your mother really is, contact me. The trust documents are in this envelope. Guard them carefully. That money is yours, legally and morally. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. I love you. I have always loved you. I will always love you. Your mother, Catherine Chen. At the bottom of the letter was a phone number and an email address. I read the letter 3 times, then 4, then lost count. Each time, I noticed new details. The way her handwriting wobbled on certain words, as if she'd been crying. The coffee stain in one corner, as if she'd written it late at night, fortifying herself with caffeine and determination. The date, 18 years ago, just days after my birth. I pulled out the legal documents, trust fund agreements, clearly establishing a fund of $500,000 in the name of Emma Grace Chen, to be administered by a neutral trustee until the beneficiary reached age 18. The signatures at the bottom were from Catherine Chen and a lawyer I didn't recognize. There was no mention of the Grangers, no mention of Victoria or David or any provision that gave them control over my inheritance. I sat in that attic for hours as the rain turned to drizzle and the afternoon light faded. My mind raced through 13 years of memories, re-examining them with this new information. The way Victoria always tensed when I asked about my birth parents. The way she'd shut down any questions about where I came from, calling it unhealthy dwelling on the past. The way she'd never let me apply for my own birth certificate or access any adoption records, claiming it was too painful to revisit that time. The way the promised education fund was always vague, always "we'll discuss it when the time comes," always tied to my behavior and gratitude and perfect performance of the role of grateful adoptee. It wasn't grief that made Victoria uncomfortable, it was guilt. It was the knowledge that she was lying, that she'd been lying for 13 years, that somewhere out there was a woman who'd given me up with love and hope and plans for my future. A woman who didn't know her daughter's adoptive mother had stolen her gift. I took the letter and documents back to my room. I hid them under my mattress, feeling like a character in a Victorian novel, but paranoid that Victoria would somehow discover them before I decided what to do. That night, I lay awake thinking about Catherine Chen. Who was she now? Had she really spent 18 years waiting for me? What if she'd changed her mind? What if the phone number didn't work anymore? What if she didn't want to know the person I'd become? But beneath the fear was something else, something that felt like hope, like possibility, like maybe I wasn't as alone as I'd always felt in the Granger house. The next morning, I called the number. My hands shook so badly I could barely hold the phone. It rang twice. Then a woman's voice, professional and warm, Catherine Chen speaking. I almost hung up. But something in her voice, something familiar and safe, made me speak. Hello, I said. My name is Emma. I think you might be my mother. There was a long silence, then a sound that might have been a sob quickly stifled. Then, Emma. Oh my God, Emma. I've been waiting for this call for 18 years. We talked for 3 hours that first day. Catherine told me about her life, about building her law practice from nothing, about the private investigator she'd hired when I turned 16, about the photos on her desk of a baby she'd never stopped loving. She told me about trying to contact the adoption agency when I turned 18, only to be told that I'd need to initiate contact myself, about how she'd waited by the phone every day for months, hoping I'd find her letter, hoping I'd call. I tried to find you before, she said, her voice tight with emotion. When you were 12, I hired a lawyer to petition the court for information. They said the Grangers were a good family, that you were happy and well-adjusted, that disrupting the adoption would be harmful. The judge ruled against me. I had to wait until you were 18 to try again, when you were 12. The same year my supposed education fund was transferred. The same year Victoria started talking about how expensive I was to raise, how grateful I should be, how I needed to earn my place in this family. Catherine, I said slowly, did you ever authorize anyone named Victoria Granger to access my trust fund? What? No, the trust has an independent administrator. Why? So I told her. About the trust documents I'd found, about Victoria's claims that the fund was depleted, about the $500 I'd been offered for university. The silence on the other end of the line was frightening. When Catherine finally spoke, her voice was cold with fury. Emma, I need you to do exactly as I say. Don't confront Victoria. Don't tell her you know. Can you get copies of any financial documents in the house? Bank statements, tax returns, anything with Victoria's name on it. I think so. They keep files in the study. Good. Photograph everything you can safely access. Be careful. And Emma, I'm going to need you to trust me. Can you do that? I thought about 13 years in the Granger house, 13 years of feeling like a ghost, like I was taking up space meant for someone more deserving. 13 years of wondering why I never quite fit, why love always felt conditional, why I was always performing and never quite succeeding. Yes, I said, I can trust you. Over the next 2 weeks, Catherine and I spoke every day. I'd wait until the house was empty, then call her from my room, my voice low and urgent. She guided me through the process of gathering evidence, teaching me to think like a lawyer, to document everything. I photographed tax returns that showed adoption subsidy payments the Grangers had collected for 13 years. I found old bank statements showing transfers from an account in my name, an account I'd never known existed, into Victoria's personal account. I discovered letters from the trust administrator to Victoria, clearly outlining that the funds were meant for my benefit alone and required documentation of education expenses. There was no documentation. Victoria had simply transferred the money and spent it. On renovations to the house, on Madison's private school tuition, on the Mercedes Victoria drove. On everything except the daughter whose inheritance she'd stolen. Catherine worked with a colleague who specialized in fraud cases. They built a file that would be devastating in court. Forged signatures on trust documents, misappropriation of funds meant for a minor, collection of government subsidies under false pretenses, years of deliberate deception. We have enough to press criminal charges, Catherine told me during one of our calls. But I wanted to ask you first, how do you want to handle this? This is your life. Your story. I'm here to support whatever you decide. I thought about Victoria's face when she'd handed me that envelope with $500, the casual cruelty of it, the assumption that I'd simply accept it, grateful for scraps from the table of the family that had done me such a favor by taking me in. I want justice, I said. I want her to know that I know, and I want her to face consequences. Then we'll give you justice, Catherine promised. The week before my birthday, Catherine came to Toronto to meet me in person. We met at a coffee shop near the university, neutral territory where I could leave if I felt overwhelmed. I recognized her immediately when she walked in. The photos from the attic didn't do justice to her presence. She was elegant and composed, but when she saw me, her composure cracked. Tears slipped down her cheeks. "You look just like your grandmother," she whispered. "My mother. She died before you were born, but she would have loved you so much." We sat in that coffee shop for hours. She showed me photos of her parents, my grandparents I'd never known. She told me stories about her childhood, about becoming a lawyer, about the cases she'd won, and the life she'd built. "I never stopped thinking about you," she said. "Every birthday, every Christmas, every milestone. I wondered if you were happy, if you had friends, if you liked school, if you knew how much you were loved, even by someone you'd never met." "Victoria told me my birth mother died in a car accident," I said. "She said both my birth parents were dead, that there was no one left who'd wanted me." Catherine's face hardened. "I've wanted you every single day of your life, Emma. I gave you up because I loved you, because I wanted you to have chances I couldn't give you then, but I never stopped being your mother. Never." We made a plan. On my 18th birthday, I would confront Victoria with the truth. Catherine would be there as my attorney and as my mother. We'd give Victoria a choice: make full restitution voluntarily and face no criminal charges, or fight us in court and face both civil and criminal penalties. "She'll fight," I predicted. "Victoria doesn't back down." "Then we'll win," Catherine said simply. "I've been preparing for this fight for 18 years. I'm ready." Now, standing in the foyer with lilies scattered across the wet marble and Victoria's face the color of ash, I realized we were finally here. The moment of truth. The moment when the lies stopped and justice began. Catherine stepped further into the house, and David stumbled backward. Madison was still frozen on the staircase, her face pale. "I think we should all sit down," Catherine said. "We have a great deal to discuss." We moved to the living room, that formal space the Grangers only used for important guests. Victoria sat rigidly on the edge of the sofa, still clutching the documents. David paced near the window. Madison hovered in the doorway, uncertain whether to stay or flee. Catherine opened her briefcase and pulled out a thick folder. She placed it on the coffee table with deliberate precision. "Mrs. Granger, I'm going to be very clear about the situation you're in," Catherine began. 18 years ago, I placed my daughter for adoption because I believed it was in her best interest. I established a trust fund of $500,000 to ensure her education would be funded, no matter what happened to me. That trust was legally binding and had clear instructions. The funds were to be used solely for Emma's benefit and were to be accessible to her when she turned 18. Victoria said nothing. Her jaw was clenched so tight I could see the muscle jumping. 7 years ago, when Emma was 12, you forged her signature on documents transferring control of that trust to yourself, Catherine continued. You then systematically emptied the account over the following years. The trust administrator contacted you multiple times, questioning large withdrawals that bore no relation to Emma's education. You provided false documentation and eventually moved the remaining funds to an account solely in your name. You can't prove Victoria started. I can prove all of it, Catherine cut her off. I have the original trust documents. I have the forged signatures, which a handwriting expert has already analyzed. I have bank records showing every transfer. I have tax returns showing you didn't declare the trust income. And I have 13 years of adoption subsidy payments, $200,000, that you collected from the Ontario government and spent on your own family, while Emma lived as an afterthought in your home. David had gone pale. Victoria? Is this true? Victoria didn't answer. She was staring at Catherine with something that looked like hatred mixed with fear. The total amount you've stolen from my daughter is $700,000, Catherine said. The original trust, plus subsidies, plus interest. I'm prepared to file both civil and criminal charges. Fraud, forgery, theft, misappropriation of funds meant for a minor. You could face significant prison time. However, Catherine continued, and I heard the steel beneath her professional tone, Emma and I have discussed this extensively. She doesn't want revenge. She wants justice. She wants what was taken from her. So I'm here to offer you a choice. She pulled a document from her folder and placed it in front of Victoria. This is a settlement agreement. You will immediately return $700,000 to Emma. You will sign over any remaining trust assets. You will provide a full accounting of how my daughter's money was spent. In exchange, we won't pursue criminal charges. You'll avoid prison and a public trial that would destroy what remains of your reputation. Victoria's hands trembled as she picked up the document. We don't have $700,000. Most of it's gone. Then you'll sell assets, Catherine said without sympathy. This house is worth what, $2 million? You'll downsize, you'll liquidate investments. I don't care how you do it, but you have 30 days to provide full restitution. And if I refuse? Victoria's voice was barely audible. Then I file charges tomorrow morning. The police will be very interested in a wealthy Rosedale socialite who defrauded a vulnerable child. The media will be interested too. I imagine the headlines would be quite damaging. Prominent family stole orphan's inheritance. Has a certain ring to it, doesn't it? David sank into a chair, his head in his hands. Madison made a small sound from the doorway. I had been quiet through all of this, letting Catherine handle the legal details. But now I stepped forward. You told me I should be grateful, I said to Victoria. You told me you'd done me a favor by taking me in. You made me feel like a burden for 13 years. Every day, you reminded me that I wasn't really part of this family, that I was someone else's mistake, that I should be thankful for scraps. Victoria finally looked at me. There was no remorse in her eyes, only anger at being caught. But I was never the burden, I continued. You were. You took money that wasn't yours. You lied to a child about her own mother. You stole from me for years and made me feel guilty for existing. And you did it all while collecting money from the government meant to care for me. You have no idea what it costs to raise a child, Victoria spat. 13 years of feeding you, clothing you, sending you to private school. I have the receipts, Catherine interrupted. The adoption subsidies you collected totaled $200,000. That's $15,000 per year. The average cost of raising a child in Ontario is $12,000 per year. You were paid more than enough to cover Emma's expenses. The trust fund was never meant for her day-to-day care. It was for her education, her future, and you stole it. The room fell silent except for the sound of David's harsh breathing. Madison had tears running down her face. I'm sorry, Emma, Madison whispered. I didn't know. Mom told me the fund was from grandfather, that it was for both of us, that you were getting the same amount. I swear I didn't know. I looked at my twin sister, who wasn't really my twin at all. We'd never been sisters, not truly. We'd just been two girls living in the same house, one cherished and one tolerated. I believe you, I said softly. And I did. Madison had been raised by Victoria too, taught to see me as less than, as other. She'd absorbed those lessons without questioning them. But she wasn't cruel like Victoria. She was just unaware. You have 24 hours to sign the settlement agreement, Catherine said, standing. After that, I file charges. Emma, do you have everything you need from this house? Yes, I said. I packed this morning. My things are already in my room, ready to go. Then let's collect them and leave. You're coming home with me. Home. The word hung in the air, and I realized it was the first time I'd heard it used in a way that felt true. The Granger house had never been home. It had been a stage where I performed gratitude and compliance, hoping to earn a love that was never really offered. But Catherine was offering something different. Not a performance, not conditional acceptance, just home. Victoria's face twisted. You can't just take her. We're her legal parents. We have rights. She's 18, Catherine said flatly. She's an adult. She can live wherever she chooses. And she's chosen me. The mother you told her was dead. The mother who never stopped loving her. The mother whose inheritance you stole. I walked out of that living room without looking back. I climbed the stairs to my room, the room I'd lived in for 13 years, but had never really been mine, and collected the 3 suitcases I'd packed that morning. Madison appeared in my doorway. Emma, I really am sorry. I wish I'd known. I wish I'd paid more attention. I wish I'd been a better sister. You didn't know how, I said, not unkindly. Victoria raised you to think this was normal. But Madison, you're 18 too now. You get to decide what kind of person you want to be. You don't have to be her. Madison hugged me then, hard and fierce. Will I ever see you again? That depends, I said honestly, on whether you're willing to see me as an equal, as a person who deserves respect, not as someone your family did a favor for. I'll try, Madison promised. I'll really try. Catherine helped me carry my bags to her Mercedes. As we loaded the trunk, I looked back at the Rosedale house with its perfect facade and its rotten foundation. Victoria stood in the window, watching us leave, her face a mask of fury and fear. I didn't wave. I just turned away and got into the car. Where are we going? I asked Catherine. My condo, she said. Downtown, near my office. It's not as big as the Granger house, but it's warm, and it's been waiting for you for a long time. I set up a room for you years ago. I know that sounds strange, but I always hoped. It doesn't sound strange, I said. It sounds like love. We drove through Toronto in comfortable silence. Catherine lived in a modern building overlooking the harbor. Her condo was filled with light and books and art, and in one corner was a door with my name on it. She opened it. Inside was a bedroom decorated in soft blues and grays, with a desk, a bookshelf already filled with classics and contemporary fiction, and a wall of photos. Photos of me at various ages, school pictures Catherine must have obtained somehow over the years. Photos of a woman who'd watched her daughter grow up from a distance, unable to touch but never unable to love. I kept track of you, Catherine admitted. Through the school, through public records, through the private investigator. I know it probably seems creepy, but I needed to know you were okay. I needed to see you growing up, even if it was just in pictures. I walked to the photo wall. There I was at 6 years old, gap-toothed and smiling in my Upper Canada College uniform. At 10, at a school concert. At 13, on the school volleyball team. At 16, accepting an academic award. Victoria had never kept photos of me on display. The Granger house was a shrine to Madison, with barely any evidence I existed. This is the most seen I've ever felt, I whispered. Catherine wrapped her arms around me then, and I let myself lean into her. I let myself cry for the first time in 13 years. Not neat, polite tears, but ugly, sobbing tears. Mourning the childhood I should have had, the mother I should have known, the years we'd both lost. I've got you now, Catherine murmured. I've got you, and I'm never letting go again. You're home, Emma. You're finally home. The next 3 weeks were a whirlwind of legal proceedings. Victoria refused to sign the settlement agreement, convinced she could fight us in court. It was, Catherine said with grim satisfaction, the worst decision Victoria could have made. Catherine's firm filed both civil and criminal charges. The fraud case was airtight. The police were very interested in a high-profile case involving a wealthy family exploiting a vulnerable adoptee. The media, as Catherine had predicted, was fascinated. Rosedale family accused of stealing orphans' inheritance, read the Toronto Star headline. Adoptive mother faces fraud charges in trust fund scheme, said the Globe and Mail. How one teen discovered the truth about her stolen future, proclaimed CBC News. Victoria hired expensive lawyers, but they couldn't argue with the evidence. The paper trail was damning. The forged signatures were obvious. The testimony from the trust administrator was devastating. The trial took 3 months. I testified twice, once for the civil case and once for the criminal trial. Each time, I told my story clearly and calmly, the way Catherine had coached me. I didn't exaggerate. I didn't embellish. I just told the truth about 13 years in a house where I was never truly welcome, about an inheritance stolen, about a mother erased from my history. The jury deliberated for less than 4 hours on the criminal charges, guilty on all counts. Victoria was sentenced to 18 months in prison, though with good behavior she'd likely serve less. The civil judgment was even more severe. Victoria and David were ordered to pay $900,000 in restitution, the original $700,000 plus damages and legal fees. They sold the Rosedale house. They liquidated their investment portfolio. They borrowed from friends and family who were shocked and horrified by what had happened, and they paid every penny. By September, I had the money that should have been mine all along, $900,000, enough to fund not just my undergraduate degree but graduate school too, with enough left over to start my adult life debt-free. But more than the money, I had Catherine. I had a mother who showed up at every court date, who held my hand through testimony, who made me tea when I couldn't sleep, who taught me that love didn't have to be earned or performed or bargained for. On the first day of classes at the University of Toronto, Catherine drove me to campus. We stood outside the law school, the same building where she'd studied as a young mother-to-be, making impossible choices and hoping for a better future for her daughter. I used to stand here, she said softly, when I was pregnant with you. I'd put my hand on my belly and promise you that somehow, some way, I'd make sure you had every opportunity I was trying to earn for myself. I'd make sure you never wanted for anything. I just never imagined it would take 18 years to keep that promise. You kept it, I said. You left me the money. You waited for me. You fought for me. Most mothers don't love their children for 18 years from a distance without any guarantee of return. That's not failure, Catherine. That's devotion. She wiped her eyes. Are you sure you want to study law? You're already better at arguments than most of my associates." "I'm sure," I said. "I want to help people like me, kids in the system. Kids being exploited. Kids who need someone to fight for them the way you fought for me." "Then you're going to be an amazing lawyer," Catherine said, "and I'm going to be the proudest mother in Canada." I hugged her tight. "Thank you for not giving up on me. Thank you for waiting. Thank you for coming to get me when I finally called." "Emma, I'd have waited 50 years if that's what it took," she said. "You're my daughter. That never changed, not for a single day. And now, finally, I get to be your mother not just in my heart but in every way that matters." I started law school that fall. I studied hard, driven by the memory of 13-year-old me finding that letter in the attic, driven by the thought of other kids who might need someone to stand up for them, driven by the example of a mother who'd built a career on fighting for justice. Madison reached out to me a few months into the school year. She'd decided not to attend Queen's after all. Instead, she'd enrolled in community college, paying her own way with student loans and a part-time job. She was studying social work. "I want to understand what happened," she told me over coffee. "I want to understand how I could live in that house for 18 years and not see what was happening to you. I want to make sure I never become her. We're building something now, Madison and I. Not the sisterhood we should have had, not the closeness that was stolen from us, but something new, something honest. Something based on who we actually are rather than the roles Victoria assigned us." David divorced Victoria while she was in prison. He sent me a letter apologizing for his complicity, for his weakness, for choosing the easy path of looking away. I haven't forgiven him yet, maybe someday. But his guilt is his burden to carry, not mine. Victoria was released after 11 months. I don't know where she lives now. I don't care. She's not part of my story anymore. She's just a chapter that ended, a cautionary tale about greed and cruelty and the consequences of treating children as commodities rather than people. My story is about Catherine now. About the mother who made soup from scratch on Sundays and taught me to cook the way her mother taught her. About the woman who stayed up late helping me study for exams, who read my papers and offered feedback, who showed me what healthy, unconditional love actually looks like. It's about learning that family isn't always the people who raise you. Sometimes family is the person who never stopped looking for you. Sometimes family is the inheritance of love and hope and fierce determination that crosses years and distance and closed adoption files. Sometimes family is a letter in an attic, a phone call made with shaking hands, a Mercedes pulling into a driveway when everything is falling apart. Sometimes family is a woman saying, "I've been waiting for you for 18 years," and meaning every word. I'm 21 now, finishing my 3rd year of law school. I'm at the top of my class. I'm clerking at Catherine's firm this summer. And I'm planning to specialize in family law, in adoption rights, in protecting children whose voices aren't always heard. Every year on my birthday, Catherine and I have a tradition. We go to that coffee shop where we first met in person. We order the same drinks we had that day, and we talk about the year that passed, about the years we lost, about the future we're building together. "Do you ever regret it?" Catherine asked me this past birthday. "Do you wish you'd never found that letter? That you'd just accepted what Victoria told you and lived your life not knowing?" I thought about it. About the pain of discovering the truth. About the trauma of the trial. About testifying against the woman who'd raised me, however imperfectly. About the cost of justice. "No," I said finally, "I don't regret it, because the truth mattered more than comfort. Knowing you mattered more than keeping the peace. Having a real relationship with you, even if it started late, matters more than pretending Victoria's version of my story was the only one." "I'm glad," Catherine said softly, "because having you in my life, really in my life, has been the greatest gift I could have received. Worth every minute of the 18 years I waited. That $500 Victoria gave me is framed on my wall now, not as a trophy, but as a reminder that my worth was never measured by what someone chose to give me or withhold from me. A reminder that truth, however painful, is always better than comfortable lies. A reminder that somewhere out there, someone loved me enough to wait 18 years for a single phone call. Loved me enough to fight when I needed her to fight. Loved me enough to let me go, and then loved me enough to welcome me home when I was ready to come back. That's the story I tell people now when they ask about my family. Not about the Grangers and their perfect Rosedale house and their dark secrets, but about Catherine, about second chances, about love that endures, About the day my adoptive mother gave me $500 for my future, and I gave her an envelope that changed everything. About the day I looked out the window and saw my real mother coming to take me home.